Sanjeevni has, Sanjeevni has completed her bachelor's in psychology at Ashoka University and has been working with the Center for Social and Behaviour Change since then. This year, she will embark upon a new journey at the University of Pennsylvania to pursue a master's in behavioral and decision sciences. So before we start, just a little housekeeping. If you have any questions during the webinar, please type them into the question box. I'll bring them up during the presentation. Now, without any further delay, we will turn the time over to Sanjeevni and would request her to start the session by introducing herself to the audience.
Thank you, Ayushi. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Please feel free to switch on your cameras. It's helpful to have an interactive session. Yeah, as Ayushi said, I'm Sanjivini, and I graduated from Ashoka in 2018 with a bachelor's in psychology and a minor in international relations. And for the last 2.5 years, I have been working with this organization called Center for Social and Behaviour Change, which is a part of Ashoka University, but independently funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The center does work in behavior science research and works very closely with the government of India. So a lot of the COVID-19 protocol communication that you've seen around has been created by our center. And with Aditi ma'am's guidance and the counselors at ProEd help, I will be going to Penn hopefully this year. I had to defer it last year because of COVID, but I'm looking forward to going to Penn in August this year. So this is a little brief about myself. My journey with Ashoka has been extremely exciting and has started off all thanks to Aditi ma'am. But just a little background about how I got to know about Ashoka and how I got into Ashoka. I graduated school in 2013, after which I went upon to study at UC San Diego, University of California, San Diego in the US. I was doing a bachelor's in physiology and neuroscience there and a minor in psychology. After studying for 1 year at the university, completing my freshman year, I decided to come back to India and stay with my family, owing to some health reasons. And I ended up taking a gap year. So 2014 to 2015, I was taking a gap year, and that's when I met Aditi ma'am. And since I had to continue my studies, she suggested looking at Ashoka University. Ashoka at that time had only had one batch of students that started off in 2014. And I was a part of the second batch. The process of the application was very similar to the US university's application process, but it was more closely knit with in-person interviews, as is usually done in the US with Ivy Leagues. The interviews were all taken by professors that I ended up meeting and making friends with when I actually did join the university. And the process was very technical, very stringent. But all in all, it was, I'm glad I got through it. A little about why I think Ashoka worked out really well for me and in comparison to the US, because a lot of people do compare US universities to Ashoka and say that it's the Ivy League or like a US education in India. But for me, it was a lot more than that, especially like just barring the obvious, it was not as expensive as going to the US. I was much closer to my family and friends, and I could come back home whenever I wanted. I'm based out of Gurgaon, so it was a 2.5-hour car journey for me. But also the quality and the exposure that I got at Ashoka was something that I struggled to find in UC San Diego. And I understand like that is something very paradoxical, because US universities are supposed to give you all kinds of exposure, are supposed to have the best professors and classes, and San Diego did have that. It had the best classes, best professors. But for me, right out of school, I wasn't mentally ready to not just manage my entire life, but start a new education in a different country. So that was one point that I was like, I couldn't concentrate fully on my academics, but also couldn't fully take care of myself as an adult, as a very young adult. But with Ashoka, the relevance and relatability of the teaching content, right? When I was in San Diego, I had to take some chemistry and physics courses. Those courses were very similar to what I'd already done in 11th and 12th. Even like the history classes that we did, they were focused on Native American history, on Mexican history. So though I couldn't relate to the content, and that could have been just my chosen classes, but there was just a relatability aspect to it for me to find my own space, especially in the academia there itself. With Ashoka, since India is influenced heavily by the British curriculums, the US curriculum, there's a mix of both. You get to learn what people outside India are studying, but also what is relevant to India today. And I found that connection, that bridge, extremely, extremely helpful. So this was just a little bit of why I personally prefer Ashoka to foreign education. I'm going to talk a little bit about my Ashoka experience and then get into the logistics of how Ashoka does teaching and what the professors are like and stuff in just a little bit. So the exposure that I did get at Ashoka was just, I found amazing professors, an amazing set of friends. That was something that I wasn't expecting. I remember on my first day at the university, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be 2 years older than all my batchmates. How am I going to do this? I'm not going to make any friends. And mom had just told me that, okay, it's 3 years, get through it and you're out and done. That's all that matters right now. And that was the thought that I went in with. However, by the first and the second year, the community, it was so supportive. The professors were because they were living on campus, you were constantly interacting with them. You were constantly interacting with all the big names in the political science world, in the philosophy world that you could think of. On a daily basis, you were intellectually always charged up. The conversations that I had with my friends were intellectually charged up. And that really translated how I think about my academics seeping into my personal life. For example, I have no theater background, but I did end up taking up this project where we conducted a 2.5-hour long play on feminism, and people actually paid to see that, and whatever profits we made from the show, we donated it to a charity. So that itself, to be able to direct and produce the whole thing, was something that I deeply cherish, and was an opportunity that someone like me, who's a newbie, who has no prior experience, could take up on, because the community is so supportive of being entrepreneurial. The other things were that I was part of the marketing team at our first fest that happened. So all the merch that was created by me and my team, and we were able to collect profits from it and contribute that to the fest, to making the fest a better place for everybody who was coming from colleges. So that experience, something marketing I have never done before, but I got the opportunity, I took up that responsibility, and it made me more confident, it made me more comfortable, and made me also realize that maybe consumer psychology or marketing is not something that I want to do. So through these smaller projects, I also learned what I like and what I don't like doing. The other things were like research projects, right? A lot of times you do research in college and in economics, philosophy, even like when you're studying business studies, business administration, you want to practice those skills. And in psychology, especially, like how we see the world is so dependent on what we are seeing around us that you don't end up learning about things unless like you choose to go out and do it. So one of my projects required me to think about how people living in a landfill. So near Ashoka, there is a huge landfill, and the waste pickers there segregate the waste. So I did a study with them where I tried to understand how they see disgust as a concept, as an emotion, and compared to what students at Ashoka found disgusting. And it was something so interesting for me because you could actually see the difference in my research results. And that's the first time I got into research. I did an experimental study on my own. It was my independent study module. It's an ISM. And I did, my professor was super great. He guided me through the entire process. How do you file for an ILB? So those technicalities were something that I was taught, and bridging the gap between what is happening on the outside versus what you're being taught in the class was something that they really, really focus on. Other than that, Ashoka does encourage its students to teach the kids who are living in nearby villages, to give them tuitions in English, in Hindi, in environmental sciences, stuff that I think we've all learned in school, but we don't actually think about how like outside our schools or outside what our teachers are teaching can impact the world. So, like sharing that knowledge is something that Ashoka has always, like as a community, focused on. And those were like little parts, apart from the education, apart from the professors, that I specifically enjoyed. Just talking about the course structure, Ashoka has a 3-year bachelor's degree. That's what is mandated by the UGC. It also allows a 4th year, like the US universities, but this 4th year is not recognized by the UGC as a 4-year bachelor's, but rather this is a PG diploma. So what happens is in the 3 years, you're expected as a student to complete your major. One major that you're coming in with, you're allowed to change your major as well, but you have to complete a certain number of courses in those 3 years. If you're unable to complete those courses in those 3 years, of course, you can go on to the 4th year and complete it. However, most students who have completed their major in 3 years choose to use the 4th year for actually like more of a career advancement, where they take up independent research projects, do thesis, or do another minor, or do a double major. So just advancing your skills. So if you're doing, say economics, and you want to go into, like, want to work on in your father's business or start a business of your own, the 4th year you can do an entrepreneurship class or a minor in entrepreneurship, and actually have that exposure of how running one's own startup looks like, what that feels like, get guidance from the best people who have started their own startups and are successful. So that kind of exposure comes in the 4th year. You get in the 4th year, you also get like a TA-ship, where you are a teaching fellow or a teaching assistant to the professors that take you on, and can like talk to them and teach your class and do discussion sessions with the undergraduate students at the time. So it also allows you to build your own profile, reach out and network with the alumni at Ashoka to get clarity on not just your career path, because the alumni do offer mentorships. So I, as an alumni, can mentor one of the undergraduate students on what they can do in their career. So that opportunity comes in. You can build your own profile and get clarity on what exactly you want to do after college. So a lot of my friends took the 4th year to actually do research and build a research profile so that they could immediately go and do a PhD. And all of them are doing PhD at Columbia and Brown. So like that was a good opportunity for them to build their portfolio. Coming back to the 3 years, the undergraduate bachelor years, there you have, I think that's one of the USPs of Ashoka, is that in the first day itself, they focus a lot on critical thinking. Now, by critical thinking, I don't mean just like the stuff that you do in your SATs and GREs, but more like thinking about arguments and making your own standpoint and building arguments. A lot of schools in India, especially CBSE schools don't teach you how to write papers, don't teach you how to write essays. And that's something that Ashoka really, really pushes you on. It gives you writing classes, how to think about arguments, how to make your own analysis. So I think that critical thinking will take you forward anywhere, whatever you end up deciding to do. If you do a math major also, that critical thinking is going to come handy. The other thing is the foundation courses. All students are supposed to do foundation courses, and these are courses that really, really changed my life, at least. And I think I'm speaking for my batchmates as well, because these were courses in philosophy, in English literature, in history, but these weren't like generic stuff that you read in school so far. It was stuff like, in English literature, we're reading a text on Mahabharata, but then we go back and watch different versions of Mahabharata created by different directors across the world. How does that translate? How does the story change across? What are the themes that stay consistent and are true to the story? Something like that. And like then you have a philosophy class. This class made me want to be a philosophy major, with Professor Kranti Saran. He is so funny, and he will put you in moral dilemmas about, what if babies were dying, and what if like you had to eat a baby, would you do it? And there were all these funny philosophical questions, but things that made you actually think about what you believe in and how do you perceive the world. And I think that exposure, that conversation that you're having with your peers, with your professors, that's what you take back home. You're reading Plato, Aristotle, and I discussed it with my mother, who had done her master's in philosophy from Delhi University. And she's like, we never thought about these texts the same way. We never analyzed these texts. We read them as, okay, this was what was said. But the opportunity to question them, to question these texts, to think about why what you believe in today's 21st century is more valuable is, I think, a really, really precious thing to do in college. And it allows you to step out of your comfort zone, step out of things that you have decided that I want to be doing in college. You still do that. You get to do them. You still get to study your psychology, economics, math, computer science, but you are also one step ahead of the other people in other colleges doing that because you have these liberal arts thinking. So and for that matter, a lot of like Young India Fellowship. So Young India Fellowship is another fellowship that Ashoka takes part. Those are people who have already done their bachelors from across India, come and get a 1-year exposure to liberal arts. So those people come just because they have done engineering or medicine from different colleges in India, but want that liberal arts thinking. So that's what Ashoka is giving you, a way to think, a way to have a conversation. So the community, the professors, and the critical thinking are some of my favorite things about Ashoka. A lot of like complaints that we get, a lot of complaints that my parents had of me while I was in Ashoka was that I was too lefty. My thinking was too liberal. But on that point, I've always told them that it's not that it's liberal or lefty, and liberal doesn't always equate lefty. It's just Ashoka did give me the platform to think on my own and make my own judgments. It doesn't mean that the campus does not welcome different viewpoints. There is a robust discussion at every point. When I was in college when Trump won, when Modi won, and those were things that were celebrated by a certain section of the campus as well. And there were communications and conversations about it, and open ones at that. Even like when we talk about feminism, a lot of people are coming from a background, they don't understand feminism or they don't want to talk about it. So how do you bring that topic up so that they not just understand it, but also have their own viewpoints about it? So it's not a lefty, it's not a JNU, it's not any of those things, but rather just a platform to have a conversation. Maybe from the outside, the voices that you're hearing are very specific ones. But when you're in campus, you're hearing all opinions all the time. And that's one of my favorite things about the campus. It's super safe, it's super beautiful. And yeah, I loved the community. In terms of clubs, I think Ashoka has been one of those places is like, if the club doesn't exist, just create one for yourself. Create a poetry club, and then there was a Hindi poetry club. Then there was an Urdu poetry club because people were interested in it. And even if like the club had like 3-4 people, it had meetings and it was open to be created. But I think of all the universities, schools, and colleges that I have, people that I've interacted with, I think Ashoka has all sorts of clubs for everyone. It has its own magazine, it has its own newspaper, it has its own student body government. You can stand for elections. I stood for elections and I lost terribly. But you have that government that is the link between you and the administration. So you have protests against the administration as well. And like you have all sorts of like college campus stuff that it's a mix of what you would experience at Delhi University as a student, but also getting the education of what you would get in a US college. So for me, that's been the mix. Sports is super huge. We have a beautiful, beautiful fitness center. There's basketball, squash, tennis, like a fully equipped gym. You have yoga classes, you have MMA classes, you have football. And one of the biggest events of the year is actually the Ashoka Premier League. It's the IPL version of, it's the Ashoka version of the IPL. And students can like actually buy their own teams and players and have matches between them. And it's like a one long weekend and it's super full of festivities. One of the interesting parts of being in a boarding kind of a university and not doing back and forth. And this is something that I realized in my first week, because I was willing to come back home every weekend because I just was still finding my place in the university. And then I realized that a lot of events do happen once college classes end, and classes end by 6:37. And after that, you have gym, shower, dinner, and then you have like club meetings at 10 in the night, at 11 in the night, because there's no like curfew. You're on campus, you can meet anywhere. You can meet in the mess, you can meet in the common rooms, you can go for a walk. And that freedom is something that that I genuinely do miss now living in Gurgaon. So that was one another thing, that the community is always awake and you're constantly a student. You never stop being a student. In terms of placements, so I did end up working with an Ashoka Center, but there are a lot of students who are doing research in centers with other universities in the country, whether it's the IIS, which is the India Institute of Statistics, or whether it's Kriya University. You have students, alumni from Ashoka working there. We also had students go into like the big four, like a lot of our alumni are were placed at PwC and BCG, and McKinsey, of course. For political science majors, we had CPR and ORF, because so many professors of ours are from CPR and they are working there, and our fellows there, they also teach at Ashoka. So you get to build that connection and end up working there in research. So wherever you do want to be working, it does open that door for you. Yeah, so that was my version of Ashoka. I hope I highlighted things that interest you, and we can take questions.
It was really enlightening, Sanjivini. Thank you so much for going in depth and sharing your experience with us. So I have a question. Just like you mentioned during your discussion that Ashoka taught you a way to think. So I just wanted to know that how it helped you, when you applied for your masters abroad in your essays and applications. So how it, enhanced your thinking and your experience.
Yeah, I think for me now, I can't distinguish my Ashoka thinking from my regular thinking, because I'm constantly in my Ashoka thinking mode. But I hope Aditi ma'am can vouch for this, but I felt that my essay quality and the content that I was writing was so much better than I first started off with her, because I was able to take out, like I was able to understand what I had done. So you have certain amount of work experience, right? And you have certain amount of education experience, and 50 other applicants, 50,000 other applicants from around the world are going to have similar things. But how do you bring out what is special about you? And how do you think, like, but that's also coming from a place of what I valued most. So when I was, I think I best explain it with an example. So in my research center, I worked mostly with public health issues. We worked a lot on issues of anemia and family planning and sexual and reproductive health amongst young adults in India. And as a statement, this is very comprehensive. It makes sense. We did behavior interventions with them, and that's what I'm going to study further at Penn as well. But doing that and understanding at what stage or what is most valuable was something that I think I learned at Ashoka, in terms of, if you're writing anemia, just being able to, about my experience with the anemia project, writing about how students were, how young mothers were not able to, like, they had myths and fears and stuff about taking the anemia tablet, that it will make pregnant women, that it would make my baby bigger and it would be harder to deliver the baby, right? And just to analyze and break that myth down, to speak to them or to tell them that your health is not going to be affected, something that young mothers in rural India don't get to hear a lot about. They don't get to hear a lot about their own health. So how do we help them prioritize it? To help that make salient was something that I applied a lot. And using the examples from my research and putting that on paper for my application was something that was really helpful. And because of my affiliation with Ashoka, with Gates, I have worked with professors at Harvard, at Penn, at U Chicago, just to get an understanding of how they do things. So that it's like for me, it's been a bridge to now go and pursue my studies again in the US, right? Like, because I know what they want to hear as well, but at the same time, I'm not undermining my experience in India or undermining my experience to my research. So that way of thinking, extracting insights, extracting things that other people will find interesting or would want to know more about is something that is taught in your foundation courses, is taught in your critical thinking seminars.
So, Sanjeevni, why did you choose US to pursue your masters? Like, did you have any other countries in mind apart from US?
So I was, so the course that I'm planning to pursue now is not very, not a lot of universities in the world offer that. I think UPenn and LSE, Durham, UCL were some of the four universities that offered a master's in behavior science. And at the same time, I was also thinking, okay, if I don't get into a master's in behavior science, I could do like a MPP, master's in public policy. That would be very close to what I would want to be doing in the future. And so I had applied to UK universities. In US, actually, the University of Amsterdam, Sion, and so 10 universities. I ended up applying to 6 back time. But yeah, so I got into 5 out of 6 of them, thanks to other team and the team. It was just getting into LSE. Like at one point last year, I was choosing between UPenn and LSE, and my parents were like, did you ever think that you would be in this position, choosing between 2 of the best universities in the world? And just, I think like my entire 6-7 years journey in the last 6-7 years journey has been just wonderful. And Aditi ma'am has guided me and been there for me throughout. Like, yeah, I'm just so grateful to her. So if you are working with her, she will. So I came to her right after Ashoka graduating, and she's like, but what have you done to get into such a college, right? If we want to go to Ivy, you have to show them something. And just her motivation and her pushing me constantly to put anything, she would just tell you as it is and really, really like tell you whether you can do it or not. And so I was like, okay, ma'am, if you believe that I would get into Penn, then I am 100% sure that I will get into Penn, and we are going to work on it. But yeah, so it was just deciding, like I kept all my options open. I kept cast a wide net, and thankfully I got through it. But yes, it's important to speak to everybody you know about the university, get their inputs, get their personal experiences, because you're going to be firstly investing a lot of money, whether you go to Ashoka or whether you go to the US universities. You want to know that you're not just going to get a good education and placement opportunities later, but your social support and the people that you're going to be with are going to be amazing as well. So that's something that holistic college experience is something that I think we can, that you can only get after speaking to students there or professors there.
So, Sanjeevni, as you said that last year you were evaluating your options both for LSE and UPenn. So, how did you finalize UPenn?
Honestly, it was just like I wanted to go to an Ivy League school. But also the masters at LSE was very research oriented, very academia focused. And I wasn't sure that I wanted to be so hardcore into academia. I wanted to keep my options open because UPenn does offer not just like courses on behavior science, but also consulting and also on research, and it gives you both those options. So I didn't want to decide too fast, and it seemed like a course that was more interdisciplinary at Penn, and I think that was the best fit for me. I do know students who did choose LSE over Penn because they wanted to do a PhD after, because it was more of a technical course and aligned better. Like LSE has this public health and behavior science curriculum, and a lot of students who wanted to do that went for specifically LSE. But for me, I'm still open. I don't want to explore my options while I can do my master's. Yeah.
So, Sanjeevni, we have a question from our audience, and we would like to know, alongside your UG experience at Ashoka, What kind of work experience or research experience helped you in your admission process in the US and UK universities?
So for the US and UK universities, I think what helped the most was the fact that I had work experience in the field that I was applying for. I have already worked in a research center that focuses on behavior science, and that was super helpful. I didn't understand what I was going in for, and that's what was reflected in my essays and my resumes, that I knew what I was doing. But other than that, I am also someone who likes to take up projects and responsibilities on my own. So that was something like, if you have something to show for how you have been proactive in seeking out projects or working on projects, things that are like unpaid internships, or worked with a startup even for 2 months, or worked in different research centers, that's something I think adds edge to you, that you haven't just followed one linear pattern, but also like stepped out of your comfort zone to understand what you enjoy. And the other part to that is when you do something different, like I worked with one of the founders at Ashoka. He was one of the Ashoka trustees. He was starting his new venture. It was a venture capitalist firm. And I was the first intern, and I did data analysis there. And I did psychological profiling for upcoming startups who wanted funding. So that work experience, I knew I didn't want to do that in life. That's not something that I wanted to build my career on. But it did teach me that I was interested in data. I was interested in psychological profiling and data analysis. So how I linked that to my work experience at CSBC, or my research experience that I'd gathered at Ashoka, was something I think added a little more edge, showed that I was, and because it was an unpaid internship, it showed that I was interested in finding out more about different things. So that bridge is something that you will constantly have to build if you're doing quite a lot of different things. Because I know students who are coming to Penn now who have no behavior science work experience, but have some work experience in different things, and how they tie that work experience to behavior science is something that I think Penn values as well.
So we have another question about extracurricular activities, importance of extracurricular activities to get into a show.
Yeah, so getting in admission into Ashoka, of course, like it's not just academics. You have to show your own standing. So in terms of extracurricular activities, honestly, they're very open to what kind of extracurricular activities you're doing, as long as you're doing some, as long as you're showing that you are someone who has not just been a captain of the school, but or like sports captain and stuff, but also can support that with if okay, again, with an example, I was a school prefect and a house captain many lifetimes ago. But now when I'm writing about these experiences, I don't say them just as statements. I talk about what I did in those positions. What was something like, I can say that I was the first prefect who started an underprivileged students post after school kind of session, right? So something like that. While there are going to be hundreds of school prefects, head boy, head girls coming to Ashoka, applying to Ashoka, what you did in that position, how did you utilize that position to put yourself apart, is something that they would value. So extracurriculars don't have to be just like I played football or I aced this exam. It can be something that you started on your own. It's something you worked with an organization, you volunteered your time. Those things are also valued. Do read books, read stuff that is relevant, because I haven't come across any student who wasn't asked what was the last book you read. Because reading is something that is really, really valued at Ashoka. You're going to be constantly reading, whatever major you choose to go for. So those things, like showing that you as an individual outside of school, you have an identity, outside of academics, you have an identity, is something I think that they're looking for.
So there is another question about the foundation courses on Ashoka.
Yes, so there are 7 to 9 foundation courses. One of them is basically a critical thinking seminar, where you read different kinds of texts and you evaluate them. So, and at the end of it, you decide your own research or essay question at the end of the class, and you write a paper on it. So the one that I wrote on and really changed my thinking. So I was coming from a place of I don't support reservations at all. I didn't support reservations at all. But throughout the class, we did readings and we had conversations. And I understood that we do, as a country, we do need reservations even still, but with a time limit. So then in that class, I learned how to write this exact thing with supported arguments. How do you say that I support reservations, but not fully? They should have a time limit and they should have certain restrictions. As a topic, it was super complicated. I did a lot of readings. I've got supported arguments from different texts. I cited them. So they teach you how to cite, how to not plagiarize, because plagiarism in academia, in any university, is going to be a big, big thing that students need to stay away from, stay clear of. So that's one course. Then you have philosophy with Professor Kranti Saran, where it just teaches you the basic of philosophy. You're reading Plato, but you're also reading the Vedas, right? So you're getting a mix of both Indian philosophy and Western philosophy. You have political science courses with Professor Malvika Maheshwari. I don't know if she's still with the university, but when you have the initial political science course, you're learning political science, not how you learned at school with like this, these are our civil rights, these are our duties, and this is what the Constitution stands for, but more in terms of how did we as a human society come together to decide that we wanted to create a political system? How do we decide what kind of governments we want, and why, where was that originated, and why did we feel a need for that? So what is and it helps you understand why as people, our political rights are so important to us, and why do some of us get more agitated than others on certain topics, especially in today's India. So that was there. We had great literature, great books with Professor Rudranshu Mukherjee, who's also the chancellor at Ashoka. His classes were at 8 a.m. and he's an old man talking very nicely in a really sweet voice, telling you stories. So basically that was the class. It was called great books, and he would you have 1.5 hours of storytelling in the morning. But then you had discussion sections with your TAs. Sorry, I just dropped my earphones. Yeah, you had discussion sections with your TAs who would talk to you about other texts, about learnings from this text, and again, adding similarities and differences to this text. Another literature class was with Professor Gil Harris. He is an amazing literature professor who specializes in Shakespeare literature. However, when we were studying Shakespeare, we didn't study it just through his text. We had those discussions in maybe like the first half an hour of the class, and we were reading Othello. And then we spent the rest of the class watching Omkara, and it was just amazing and so much fun. And it was followed by a great discussion on how Vishal Bhardwaj, got out the themes of Othello, contextualized them to the Indian context in Omkara. And again, that also encourages you to think critically beyond what you're reading and seeing on the screen. It requires you to think about the thought the person who's creating the stuff has put in. So that took a step forward. So these were some of the courses, and other courses also go in similar line. The point of these courses are that they are what you're going to be reading and doing in these courses is going to be something very simple, but it's going to train you to think a certain way. It's going to train, and by thinking a certain way, I know I'm repeating that a lot, is just how to do the analysis, how to see beyond what you're just seeing, how to understand beyond, how to make relations of what you're learning about to the outside world. Bringing up examples, thinking about it beyond just your textbooks. Because in school, at least for me, I was from a CBSE school. I was just taught to learn the text, right? In my board exams, I was asked to just memorize formulas in physics and chemistry. But here you're actually delving into physics and chemistry and understanding where the formula came from and why we need this to calculate anything. And how can this formula be used in different places around in the world around you? So it's just a metaphor with the formulas to explain how critical thinking works. Of course, if you do end up going to Ashoka and having these seminars, you are going to have a lot of arguments with people. A lot of like, my house is like generally like a battlefield because both my parents are supporters of the Modi regime, and I am not. And we have like constant discussions. Those are actually discussions where my parents do end up saying that, yeah, what you're saying has value, and what they are saying, I go back and do my research on that. So it's a two-way street, right? Like we're trying to learn from each other, hear what the other side has to say, and present arguments. And I sometimes, when they agree, or I feel really proud of myself. I feel like, yes, I did it. I like they're thinking about it at least. So yeah, I hope that was a helpful answer.
That's really helpful. So, Sanjeevani, I would like to ask you that after completing your master's in behavioral and decision sciences, what are your plans? Like, what are your short-term and long-term goals?
Oh my God, that's I think that's the most difficult question. For me, like honestly, right now I'm just excited to do my master's at Penn. The good thing about this course is it allows me next year to actually work with people who need and are using these tools, behavior science tools, in their work. So I will be like, from January itself, I will start networking with consultancies and talking to people who are applying this stuff in their work. So hopefully I like, right now I haven't decided, but the two paths that I think I'm going to go for with are either doing like working with a consultancy, because I have worked in the development sector in India and I have thoroughly enjoyed it, but I don't want to not work in the private sector and see how applications are there. So, and the work in the private sector would include like working with um, companies like Pepsi in their marketing, and like the apps that you see on your phone, Zomato and Uber, how are they so intuitive? How do they know where you want to be clicking, and how to make it look so easy and simple and clean? That's something where people like me would come in. So I want to get that experience as well, work very closely with tech. So that's one thing, but I am not very good at tech, and I realize that. And it's always been a passion of mine to come back and work into that sector for sure, but work with people from areas of conflict. So refugees, especially Rohingya refugees, because a lot of the refugees a lot of the waste pickers I spoke to during my independent study at Ashoka were refugees from Bangladesh. And just there's something very systematically different in how you and I live our lives and how they experience the world around them without a political identity, without any permanent home. And that's something that I think I want to apply my learnings to, but in a longer term. Hopefully in the shorter term, work and get as much exposure as I can in this field of behavior science in public and private sector.
So, Sanjeevani, what would you advise to the students who want to go to Ashoka, and then students who are planning to go abroad for their masters or undergrad? So, what would be your advice for them?
So for Ashoka, I would say that be as genuine in your application as possible. Build your profile in such a way that you that you come across as someone who is interesting and who has a passion for what they're doing, has a little bit of clarity in what they're doing, has worked outside of school. That I think is something you really like. Anybody who wants to go to Ashoka has to apply for. Um, that's one thing. Like I know a student who didn't get in one of my closest friends right now. She didn't get in the first time, so she studied at Jindal for a year, OP Jindal, and then applied to Ashoka again and got in the second time. But work on yourself. Show that you are someone who is like a full package. That's what they're looking for. Even if like because my board exams were around a 90%, which is not very good if I were to compare it to a Delhi University student anyway. But building your profile, showing that you have done stuff when you could have just not done it anyway. Like, in summer holidays, one can avoid doing internships, but you choosing something that adds personality to you. So build your profile as a whole person and not just an academic student. And for those of you who are planning to pursue a master's in the US, I would say get work experience. not just because it helps build your profile for your masters, but also because it helps you understand whether that's something that you want to do in the first place or not. Getting real world experience, even if it's for a year, helps you understand, okay, this is what I want to be doing and this is what I don't want to be doing. And then you can actually do a more targeted master's approach, because most master's courses are very, very niche, very specific. So if you're going to be spending that much time and energy and effort into it, know that you want to do it for sure. And work experience has really, really has helped me network with people. So even like the guest lecturers who are coming to Penn in the next couple of months, I have had the opportunity to interact with them previously because I have been working in this field. I've reached out to them on LinkedIn. I have shared my posts with them, my articles with them. It's just been a good communication for me to build my profile that way.
So I would request the audience to kindly post their questions they have. So Sanjeevi, how was your experience with ProEd?
Oh, it was amazing. It was so, so helpful. I think I met Ayushi on her first day as well at ProEd, but I think just the investment that Aditi ma'am and all the counselors have on each student, just for me to be able to write a message on the group and get a response from literally the entire team is amazing. I don't feel scared at all. Like even right now with the visa dates and stuff, Aditi ma'am has created like a small community for us to talk to other students who are going to the US in the coming years and are facing issues with the visa. And I'm constantly asking questions about whether they have gotten the COVID vaccine or um, when their dates are and how they are tackling the website and stuff. So, and just the questions that she has shared for the interview. And like I panic called her last week and I'm like, ma'am, they will ask me, why did I leave the US the first time? What do I say? And she's like, just say what you would have said otherwise, what you have told the university, just write it down on a piece of paper and send it to me. Don't explain too much. It's like, okay, I can breathe again. Even now, my parents are just like, Joe, why don't you just call Aditi ma'am and ask her? Like, she would have all the answers. So it's like having a supportive family throughout this entire process, having someone that is guiding you, is telling you what to do. And with her experience and her connections and network, you also get access to other people who might be in the same boat as you or who have already crossed the hurdles that you are experiencing. Just for me, like to be able to share all of these things with you and thinking back to my first day at Ashoka is just such a drastic change, but I've had her support throughout this and it's just been super helpful.
So now I'll ask Aditi ma'am about something about Sanjeevi. How was her experience?
So, it's been an incredible experience. She came to me from University of California, San Diego, wanting to do something like that. And, it was her blind faith and trust in me, I think, which, helped me be a good mentor, from choosing between DU, which was such a known university, to Ashoka. When Sanjeevni joined, Ashoka was totally unknown. But just, I think my telling her that Ashoka is the place and her faith in me and joining the university and then doing so well and passing out and then again coming back to me for her masters. I think one can be a good mentor when you have faith. I think Sanjeevni brought it out in me, and Sanjeevni. And I mean, the less. The, whatever I say is not enough to describe how hardworking she is and her capability. I'm sure after UPenn again, she will do something incredible. I mean, the amount of work that she's doing to support India and improve its public health is incredible. The psychological interventions and nudges she has been using and working with the government and the Bills and Melinda Gates Foundation. I mean, her resume itself is a testimony to the. And I think as a nation, we will be very grateful to Sanjeev. We are, and we will be even more grateful. I'm sure with people
Wow.
with her at the helm of our country, COVID, what happened with the COVID wouldn't have happened. I'm sure once she comes back from UPenn, she will make further inroads into improving, the situation in our country.
Ma'am, you're too kind. Thank you so much. You're too kind.
Oh, you are incredible, Sanjeevni, and I can see you going a long way from this
Thank
space
you
that
so
you've
much.
come. Yeah.
No, I just anybody who's working with Aditi ma'am, I would definitely say that just trust her completely. And the team, like just trust, like abide by everything they say, and it's gotten me very good results. Just please, like if you don't doubt her, don't think, but you, yeah, of course, if you have questions, do ask, but do trust the team that they know what they're doing. They have great experience. They have great students, and they're amazing. So trust them, please, fully.
Thank you, Sanjeevani. Really.
I would request everyone to pose their questions because we are about to end the webinar here. So I guess Sanjeevani, you pretty much answered all the questions they must have at the starting of the webinar. It was really interesting to hear about your experience and everything. It was really enlightening. Thank you so much for taking out time from your busy schedule for this webinar, and we are really grateful to you.
Thank you so much, Ayushi. And if there are any other questions, I'm a part of the group that ma'am has created. So please feel free to reach out to me. It has my number. You can reach out to me personally if you have any other questions as well.
I would like to thank everyone for taking out time for this webinar. And Sanjeevani, thanks again.
Thank you
For
so
such
much.
an enlightening session. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Sanjeevani.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Ayushi.